Hello, everybody, and welcome to How to Write a Pro-Animal Op-Ed. So my name is Bjorn. I helped organize this event here today. I like to say I wear many hats within the animal movement. You might recognize me from Sentient. You might recognize me from Analytics. You might recognize me from other places I've been. Today, I'm here representing the Media Strategies channel in the Hive Animal Advocacy Network. So that channel is designed to help animal advocates understand the media landscape, be aware of anti-animal narratives, and we help provide support, resources, and sometimes editing for pro-animal, anything in the media, pro-animal articles, press releases, op-eds, pitches, videos, really anything like that. So I wanted to just quick gauge the room. Please give a thumbs up if you're in the Hive network already. If you don't know how to do that, go to the React button at the bottom of the screen. Okay, so it's looking like most people are in the Hive. And give me what else can we do? Give me a clap if you are in the Media Strategies channel at Hive. Okay, some. It's looking like fewer than people are in Hive. Okay, that's good to know. If you're interested in joining either the Hive channel or the Media Strategies channel, I can provide a link in a moment. But if this kind of thing, like pro-animal op-eds, if that kind of thing is really exciting to you, this is what we talk about all the time in that channel. So I would recommend joining if you haven't already. So that brings us to today. We are going to enjoy a hybrid event today. So in a moment, I'm going to play a 30-minute training video from Jessica Scott-Reid. She is a writer and a journalist, and she's going to explain what she does best, how to pitch and craft a pro-animal opinion piece. Then we are going to do a live Q&A for about 25 to 30 minutes or so. You can ask Jessica any question you have about opinion pieces, pitching, specific ideas of things you're working on, narratives, messaging, anything like that. And hopefully we can have a really interesting conversation and everybody can learn some things about op-eds and pro-animal narratives and everything like that. So first, Jessica, I would love it if we could all learn a little bit more about you. So please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi all, this is so fun. I'm so glad we're doing this. My name is Jessica Scott-Reid. I am a freelance journalist. I've been doing this for almost a decade now, focusing specifically on animal issues, food systems, plant-based eating, climate change, the environment. I do a lot of my work in the Canadian media, but I also work in American media as well. In Canadian media, I do almost exclusively opinion pieces. That's where I got my start almost a decade ago, writing about animal issues in the newspapers here in Canada, including the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the Winnipeg Free Press, and others. Over that time, I've also evolved my work into doing some reporting. So I work with publications like Corporate Knights Magazine and Sentient, of course, where I've actually been able to use a lot of my knowledge gained in writing opinion pieces to do this work as now a culture writer and a features writer for Sentient. So over that time, my work has evolved, as has I as a person, as we hope to do through our work in advocacy for animals. But something that hasn't changed is centering of animals, animal issues, and the impacts that animal agriculture, animal testing, and other exploitative industries have not only on those animals, but also the world around us. So that has been sort of a keystone point that I've made in my career. And it's kind of been my guiding light over this time. And as long as I've kept the animals and those issues center, then some things just don't change. Obviously, the world has changed, culture has evolved during this time while I've done this work, but keeping animals at the center hasn't. And I think just keep that in mind as we go through this training. And keep that in mind when you're asking these questions about how you can be a voice for animals in the media. It's a really important place to be a voice for animals. I know some people have the idea that animals are voiceless. Of course, in many ways they aren't, but in the media, they need advocacy, and that needs us to do that work. So whether it's opinion pieces, reporting, other multimedia works, or even letters to the editor, which is also a really great segue into opinion pieces. Animals and those who stand up for animals as well, like animal activists and animal advocates, also need a voice in the media. And in many ways, that can be a job for all of us in different degrees. So I guess without further ado, we'll move into the training module and we'll see how all of us could possibly be those voices in the media.
So first we'll start off with just why do papers and magazines and websites want opinion pieces? Differing from regular journalism and news reporting or essay writing, opinion pieces come specifically from outside contributors, so non-staff writers for publications. So they offer a great range of voices, and that's what publications really want, to offer commentary beyond reporting, to engage readers in discussions and debates, and to further perspectives on current topics, events, and cultural norms. They play a very important role in media today, furthering dialogue and ideas, and I really think that opinion pieces are how we evolve our culture. So when we're talking about animal rights, opinion pieces are extremely strong in that arena, because this is how we push norms and how we evolve cultural ideas is through opinion pieces. And so this is where we should be doing a lot of our writing, I think. So who writes opinion pieces? Typically, you're going to have experts in their fields, academics, but we also have advocates, animal advocates, like that's what I consider myself, writers, and just regular citizens with lived experiences and strong opinions and a skill for writing. So what you want to be as an opinion writer is the one person who can talk about this issue better and stronger than anyone else. And that's what you need to convince editors of. Even if you're not, a seasoned expert in something, in your pitch, you should be able to convince that editor that you are the one person who can tell this experience and this story. So for example, I'll tell you how I got started in this. When I was first writing opinion pieces, I focused mainly on animal welfare issues, a lot to do with dogs and cats, with animal rescue groups, with breeding, with selling cats and dogs online, these sort of pet issues. And the reason I was able to write these pieces, apart from the fact that I was a writer and I had a communications degree, but I had the lived experience because I was working with animal rescue groups. I was a volunteer. I was a dog foster person. And so I sort of had this inside experience of what it was like to volunteer with an animal rescue group, to deal with animals in shelters and things like that. And so because I was that person that had this inside experience, I was able to have an opinion about it from a sort of expert position without being an actual expert. So living these experiences makes you an expert, and don't ever let anyone tell you differently. So then we move on to what do we write about? People say write what you know. Obviously, we're all here for a common reason. If animal rights, if veganism, animal liberation, these things are things you know, then that's what you should write about. But opinion pieces specifically are coming off of almost always headline news. So for example, I get contacted a lot by different sort of rescue groups and animal activists and lobbyists and things that want me to write about this issue that's important to them. And unfortunately, I have to tell them often that if it's not in the news, I can't often write about it. Not just in the news. Sometimes it can be a social media event or something that's gone viral on social media. But typically it has to be something that people already know about. People are already talking about. Not always, but almost always. So the way I really keep on top of that is with Google keyword searches that you get sent to your email every day. It's a very simple and easy thing. I suggest you do it if you want to stay on top of maybe things happening in your local area. Set up a Google search for your city and vegan. and your city and animal cruelty, your city animal agriculture, these keywords. And so every day in my inbox, I get about 6 of these emails that will tell me, Canada, animal rights, whatever's come up that day on Google. And that's how I stay on top of what the current issues are, and how I'm able to then go to editors of those publications with a link to the story that was in their paper and say, this is what I want to write about. Is this story in your paper? Here's my opinion. We'll get more into that later. Start with regional. Those are usually the easiest ones to get into, your local papers, and work up from there. I started writing for the Winnipeg Free Press, where I am here in Canada, on my hometown paper. I still do every once in a while. The Montreal Gazette, these smaller papers are always looking for local voices on these issues, and then you can work up to national and websites, international websites. So we'll go to the pitching stage now, because that's always the big thing that everyone's always concerned about. How do we get through pitching? So what I thought we would do is create sort of a scenario of something that comes up in the news and how I would go about pitching something like that. So it's a terrible scenario. So let's say, God forbid, that Donald Trump, because if there's anything to do with Donald Trump and animals, we can pitch all day about that. Every paper will want to talk about that. Donald Trump decides that chickens no longer require stunning before slaughter. Imagine he said that. So as not to interfere with line speeds, which we know he's cared about in the past, and productivity and profit. That's what he prefers. So first thing you're going to do, of course, is find that headline. And then you're going to look at that publication that had that headline, and you're going to go look for the opinion editor. So the opinion editor you'll find on the masthead page. Sometimes they have the email addresses listed, sometimes they don't. I also like to look on Twitter. Twitter is a really, really great place to connect with the editors and reporters if you ever need a reporter. And then you can always just Google. You can kind of Google what the email setup is for a different publication, or look for PR people. PR people always have their email addresses all over the internet. And if you look at how the PR people have their setup, say like name.name@washingtonpost.com or whatever, then you can apply the opinion editor's name to that format and it'll probably work. That's what we call creeping on Facebook or on Google. Okay, so then to write up the pitch, so we're talking about this scenario of Donald Trump no longer requiring stunning of chickens. So I would write it like this. And there's a lot of ways you could do this. I'm just going to tell you how I do it. So, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Editor. I am a location-based, wherever your location is, Canadian or city or whatever. I would say I am a Canadian freelance writer. I specialize in animal rights and welfare topics. With perhaps you'd say with Sentient Media, or then you could also include, I've also covered these topics for this publication, and then you're going to put in a link, whether you have a website, your muck rack page, or maybe just 3 links to 3 of your favorite recent pieces that you have published, whether they were, amateur pieces or published pieces or whatever you have, you show your work, whatever you're proud of. I'm interested in contributing an opinion column regarding Donald Trump's recent announcement that chickens may no longer be stunned prior to slaughter. Link to the publication from that paper whose editor you're talking to. So you show them this was in your paper and now I want to talk about it. And then you're going to put a short paragraph that strongly states your position and why. Shorter the pitch, the better, truly. But take the time you need also. There's a sweet spot in there. So I'll read to you what I would write. Me personally, I don't like to say I think. That's going to be a given. This is your opinion. I don't use I a lot in my work. Sometimes editors like it. I just got asked today to add I to an article. But I tend to stay away from it. It's obvious it's your opinion. Removing stunning from the slaughter process of chickens contradicts legal, cultural, and ethical standards in America. Chickens may be the most frequently slaughtered animal in the US, but they are sentient beings capable of great pain and suffering. To ignore this whilst prioritizing profit is to move backwards as a society. That's all I would state. So you're saying your position, you're using a judgment statement, and that's basically it. I can have this draft to you by tomorrow, by the end of the week, by whenever you need it. And I just end, maybe it's cheeky, I just end with the word thoughts, ? Thank you, Mr. or Mrs. Editor. Great to connect with you. And then your name. And then if you have a signature that kind of states who you are, maybe you have a master's degree, and some links to your social media pages. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you all a link to a piece I wrote for the New York Daily News about the chicken situation with Donald Trump. Thankfully, not a no stunning situation, but the sped up line speeds. If you just want to take 2 minutes to look through. The pitch that I used was very much what I just explained to you all here, and it resulted in this article. And you guys can take a minute to read through it. Does everybody see it there in your chat?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. I don't know if it will work for everyone. I know that it won't work if you're in Europe. So I apologize for that, but there'll be other things you can read. New York Daily News is crappy like that. Next, if you get the gig, you hear back from the editor. I typically find if an editor's into it, they'll write you back right away because opinion pieces are very much connected to the news, and so they'll need it fairly quickly. Some, take a week. Some will get back to you right away. Follow-ups are not a problem. You have nothing to lose by harassing people 24 hours later. I'm all about it. So then at that point, you'll have to sign a contract, agree on a fee. I am not about hiding fees. I think writers should discuss fees that they're being paid and make sure that you are getting paid. But I can tell you that the range of payment for opinion pieces is very broad. And of course, depending on your region where you're living, in North America, I can tell you it can be $150 up to $1 a word for a 900 word piece. I can tell you I currently do both at the same time. So you are going to take what you can get from different places. The typical mid-range is about 300 when you're first starting out. So make sure you're getting paid for your work. Don't work for free, except for maybe right at the beginning. Okay, now writing your opinion piece. So different from typical news stories and other forms of journalism, op-eds can have a more flexible structure. But similar to news and other forms of journalism, the opening paragraph still very much is key. I like to start sometimes with a news hook, like you saw in that last piece, where I go right into what happened with the news. Again, especially if we're talking about Donald Trump, you want to get his name right in the first paragraph and what he did or what he said. But there's other ways to start. But okay, first we'll start with the news. So I'm going to send you one quick one. We're just going to read the beginning. We don't have to read the whole thing. So the Toronto Star, this one. We'll just read through the first paragraph. I'll send it to you. Okay, so first paragraph says, Ontario's Finance Minister Victor Fedeli announced last week a new multi-million-dollar funding program set not to boost education or healthcare, not improved rural internet services, and certainly not animal protection post-OSPCA opt-out, but rather horse racing. So in that opening, I touched on a lot of different news things that were happening, right? So those were about 5 things that were in the headline news that month. And I was able to put it all in that first paragraph. You're going to bring in a lot of people who were pissed off about all those things into this article by touching on all those news stories all in one. I also like to start sometimes with questions. You know, like they say, a good speech sometimes starts with questions. Opinion pieces can often be written like speeches. So let me see if I can find you this one. 1 second. I have to look at. Just bear with me 1 sec. Oh, so this is a fun one about plant-based meats, whether or not they should be called plant-based meats, because people have a problem with that. And there it is. So this one starts with some questions. Does the term plant-based meat confuse you? Does it make you feel perplexed about what a product labeled as such is actually made of? Is it plants? Is it animals? Is it Soylent Green? If any of you are old enough to get that 1970s film reference. So questions can also be a good way. That's kind of a classic. But mostly the way I like to start, and I think is the most effective, is to start with a bit of narrative. Even though these are, you know, news-heavy type pieces and we're talking about very serious subjects, I think a bit of narrative at the start, people like that. It's user-friendly to read. So I'll send you another one here. This recent one about shark fin in Canada, which I'll tell you today passed into law just last night. So there it is, the Globe and Mail. So, a shark struggles to free herself from the rope hauling her onto the ship. Fishermen quickly grab her and hack off her fins, each side, then the top, maybe even her tail. She is still alive when they throw her back into the ocean, where she can now no longer swim, so she sinks deeper and deeper, dying a slow death. Depressing, but effective. I think if you ever have the opportunity not only to use narrative, but to use narrative from the animal's perspective, any chance you have to do that, do it. Because not only is it effective and, you know, very good at making your case, we just need more of that in media, right? We just need more animal perspectives in media to be that voice for them. So if you get the opportunity to do that, if it's ever appropriate. Another one about animal activists on farms, which Sentient Media wrote a great piece about recently. All right, I sent it there. Why are animal activists trespassing on farms? Because the industry polices itself. On a cold day in early March, animal activists trespassed onto a dairy farm in southern Ontario, making peace signs with their hands, wearing biohazard covers on their feet, their faces unmasked and visible. The dozen or so activists walked past farm staff and gave themselves a self-guided tour, live streaming every moment online. The event left farm owner Lloyd Webber reportedly shaken up. So again, you're telling a story. And then there's the contextual narrative, offering a bit of a historical context to the situation. Again, it's kind of a classic thing. I'll show you one more here. Humane meat. We all know that humane meat is bogus. And there's that. So the first Humane Society opened in Canada in 1869. Concerned with the treatment and welfare of animals, humane societies and SPCAs now exist across the country. When we consider the term humane as it relates to animals, these are often the places we think of where animals have long been cared for and where people fight for their protection. So a bit of context. And then we're going to get into the news hook after that. So you see how there's these different ways to start, but it's all about grabbing your audience's attention, bringing them in with the news hook or some questions or some narrative, historical narrative. And then around your, say, third graph, sometimes it's your first, sometimes your fourth, but around that top section, you're going to need to make your position known, your thesis statement, so to speak. So I like to do a very basic, it's not always going to work this way, but we'll go back and we'll see in the plant-based and the horse articles. So you're going to say, this is wrong, unacceptable, cruel, the right move, worthwhile. You make a value judgment. And then you're going to move into your because later and make your case. But you have to make a value judgment. So if we can go back up to the plant-based foods article at 1:21 p.m., or that's what it is for me here, you'll see after the questions, I get right into the news hook. So then to the Quebec Cattle Producers Federation, backed by the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, seem to think Canadian consumers can't figure out that the famous vegan Beyond Meat burger, marketed as plant-based meat, is made from plants, and has lodged a complaint to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So you have your start, you have your news hook, and then to the third chapter. It's a new chapter in the rhetorical battle over plant-based food labels, a battle that stems not from genuine concern for consumer confusion, but rather fear and desperation in the face of a booming, eco-friendly, and ethically sound plant-based proteins market. So I have my intro, I have my news hook, and then I have my value judgment. What my point is that this is actually bullshit. They don't actually think that consumers are confused. They're just scared. Yeah, okay, and then you're gonna make your case. Now, making your case can go a lot of different ways, depending on how many words you have and depending on the voice of the publication. So, for example, when I write for the New York Daily News, they are more of a tabloidy type of thing, and they want their articles like yesterday. So it's going to be a quick flash in the pan type of article where I'm just going to get in there and I'm going to give my opinion, back it up with what I think, and that's it. They don't really require a whole lot of sources or other voices. But say when I write for the Globe and Mail, they really want other sources and voices and experts to weigh in and to be quoted. So it really depends on who you're writing for and how much time you have and how much they're paying you. The more they're paying you, the more work you do to do more heavy reporting. So if you're working with sources, your main source will be the initial news stories where you got the idea, or the social media events. You can gather info online from the different media versions of each story on the same topic. And even comments in comment sections on social media. You can sort of get an idea of what people are thinking of this topic through those comments, and on Twitter as well. Right, shorter pieces only need your opinion. Oftentimes you'll also need to contact like government leaders, police spokespeople, witnesses, just like a reporter would do. You want other voices to confirm yours. Even though we're writing a biased opinion, which is what we're supposed to do, it's also great to be able to have other people weighing in that will confirm your position. I want to make one word about working with advocacy and activist groups, animal advocate and advocacy groups. Most can be trusted, and honestly, some cannot. We all know that what they're doing, some are doing it ethically, and some are manipulating facts to make their point. You have to figure out who that is. Always try and cross-reference whatever you learn from activists and advocacy groups. Question their methods of how they attain footage. Confirm the locations of where they say things happened with the actual, say, slaughterhouses and stuff. Always get a second confirmation if you can. Don't feel like you are being mean or that you're second guessing the people that are on our side. You know, we consider ourselves advocates and activists as well. But in order to really stay credible for us as writers, because again, as a freelance writer, you are your own brand. You need to stay credible for yourself and for the movement. You don't ever want to be perpetuating false narratives or incorrect facts. Always make sure that you find out the truth for yourself. It's very important for our credibility. Opinion writers must still act like journalists in that way. We might be able to be biased, but we still have to be correct. Fact check yourself. You think editors fact check you? They don't. I don't know what it is about opinion editors, if they're different from news reporting editors, but I have missed things. I have been incorrect about things. that I thought an editor would have caught, and they don't. They just don't fact check. Do your own fact checking, take the time and do it. And when you do these facts, stats and facts, include links, hyperlinks in your text to credible news sources, academic studies, whatever you can do to find the most credible source for your fact. The paper may not include them. They may come from rival news sources, and they may not include them, but you're using them for your editor. You're proving it to your editor that this point is true. If you don't do it, they're going to come back to you and say, can you send me a link to support this stat or this fact? Anyways, so just save yourself the time and include it in your initial draft. Okay, everyone still good? Okay, good. All right, we're almost done. So language use. This is a fun part, I think, because as opinion writers, again, we are allowed to be more flexible, a bit more creative. We can be passionate in what we're writing about, but not sensational. There is, again, a sweet spot there. We can use more creative language, more adjectives for sure, more emphasis, drawing attention to one area while maybe drawing attention away from another area, very strategically. We can use stats in sort of a self-serving way, but we can't exaggerate and we can't misrepresent the facts. So manipulate it in a way that, you know, makes your case. You know, this is a persuasive essay, so to speak, but don't exaggerate and don't misrepresent. When we're writing about animals and animal rights and veganism and these sorts of issues, often the facts are shocking enough. We don't necessarily need to overdo it, and if you do overdo it, you won't get a lot of work. You still have to be, you know, a professional and a journalist while reporting on these very emotional issues. There's no need for hyperbole. It's already there. It exists. So find that sweet spot between passion without inflation, if that makes sense. And finally, the editing process. Be open. Don't take it personal, but don't sacrifice your message or your voice. There's a way to do that. I have in the past sacrificed my message and my voice, and I have long regretted it. Sometimes you feel like the sacrifice is worth it in order to get at least part of the message into a big publication, but really be careful about it, because I still have regrets about at least one piece for sure. That it will exist forever on the internet, that doesn't truly represent what I think and how I feel. But it was a big gig, first time in a new magazine, so I went for it. I still don't know if it was the right decision. So be open to editing, take what editors have to say and learn from it. But at the same time, if your voice is being manipulated or if your message is being altered, don't be afraid to say no and to pull it. They may call your bluff or they may not. Don't bluff. Don't make it a bluff. Actually pull it if you feel the need to. Don't feel bad to do that. And I think that's it for that.
Okay. So that is the training video, and we're going to open it up to some questions. If you'd like, you can put the questions in the chat and I can ask them to Jessica, or you can just unmute yourself and go ahead. So take it away.
And don't be shy. Yes, of course, that video was a few years old. Obviously, the references are a little bit old, but the information and strategies are all still very much applicable and the same today. So if there's any concern about the timeliness, it all still works. If you have any ideas that you're shopping around for something that might work in your local paper, you think, feel free to ask me how best to approach it. I definitely recommend starting with your local paper. Being a local advocate in your community is a great position to write from. That makes you an expert, You don't have to be a PhD or an academic. If you are a local animal activist or advocate and you know things that the rest of the public doesn't know, that makes you an expert in your local paper. So use that position. So if any of you have any ideas you're thinking about writing about in your local paper, let me know them. Let me see. We can workshop it a bit.
We have some
I
questions
see.
coming in. First, we can start with Dane's question. So you suggest pitching the article first before sending the whole thing. What do you think, Jessica?
It's a great question. And it really depends on the publication. Some publications have rules about that you have to send in a whole piece. I personally and would suggest I like to pitch an idea before I write it. I don't like to work when I don't know for sure they're taking it. Some places will say, okay, that's interesting, send me a draft, but I don't guarantee I'll publish it. To me, that's enough of an in that I will then go ahead and do the work. I also like to be open to conversation beforehand. So if you write the whole thing and send it in, and the editor might want it to go a bit of a different way, then they might just say no. Whereas at the pitching stage, they may give you some guidance so that then you can produce something that they're more likely to like. I definitely recommend pitching first, then sending in a whole piece. But that's not for everyone. Some people need to write it out first. And a lot of places do want the full piece to begin with. So look on a publication's guidelines for submissions. They will tell you. And also you want to know about word count. That's really important. Like, for example, the Toronto Star only takes things that are 500 words or 650 words, and they're very specific about that. So you have to look at their word count, whereas other publications take 700 or 900 words. And that is important because it has to physically fit into a printed newspaper for the most part. And if you go outside of those word counts, then it won't fit. So to adhere to their submission guidelines is important, so you can look those up.
Great. We have a question from Noah, who asks, I would love to hear more about writing from an expert's point of view without using current headlines as a hook.
Yes, so current headlines are important. I think that's your number one way to get in, but it's not an always thing. So I've also written things that were based off of social media events or something that's gone viral online that maybe hasn't been picked up by the news. So for example, I wrote once about the sled dog industry when Canadian activist Jenny McQueen, she chained herself to a sled dog house in a sled dog holding facility, and the news didn't pick it up. And in that case, I was able to use this viral live stream that she used while she did it as something that the news didn't pick up. And in that case, I presented as an exclusive. So I took it to the Toronto Star and I said, the media hasn't talked about this, but it was this viral event that hundreds of people watched live. And I will write an opinion piece about it as an exclusive. So in that case, you have something that the news hasn't picked up yet, but you can present it as an incentive for your piece. So, and it doesn't always have to be social media either. It can be something that's happening in the academic space, perhaps a journal article that came out that didn't get as much media coverage as it should have. If you can find something that has happened that didn't get media coverage, you can present it that way. But there usually has to come out of some event. It can't just come out of nowhere. And you can have something that you want to write about that maybe didn't have any attachment to an event, but then you go find one, or you wait for the right time. I have a lot of sort of ideas in my head that aren't attached to the news, but I know something's going to happen eventually, and I'll just keep that on the back burner and have it ready and waiting for the next time this happens. So for example, I write a lot about vegan parenting as well. And for a while, I wasn't able to place a piece. And I just knew I'm going to wait till one of those stupid sensational tabloid things happen where a vegan parent, kills their kid by malnutrition when in fact it has nothing to do with veganism. They just only fed them almond milk or something. And you know that those stupid stories come up every once in a while. And so if you have something ready and waiting, you can just wait for your time where it will give you the best opportunity attaching it to something that happens.
Great answer. Noah had a follow-up question. about not tying it to current events necessarily. I think you answered it though by, yeah, biding your time and waiting for something. I think that's very true, is because with veganism and animals, like there are so many essentially anti-animal narratives out there that something will occur like every 6 months or every year. It's almost like a cycle.
Unfortunately, it always happens. I always say, like, I kind of wished that I wrote myself out of this job, but unfortunately,
Yeah.
the job continues because the issues continue. So sometimes you just need to wait for that perfect timing. And by all means, if there is no event and you just want to jump in on an issue that you think is important, go for it. What have you got to lose other than that? You may just miss that opportunity with that publication if they say no, but there's always another publication, and maybe then you'll just wait.
Okay. Great answer. Laura asks, does being a regular letter to the editor help you get op-ed pieces?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure. I don't know if people have transitioned from writing letters to the editor to op-eds. I have suggested that people try. If anybody has taken my advice and it's worked, I'd love to know. I also think it's important to talk about letters to the editor. I know that it's a great segue to learn how to write persuasively and get into the media. I have told people to start that way. I'd love to hear if people have actually successfully transitioned over to the op-ed space. But I think letters to the editor themselves stand alone as a super impactful tool. So even if you are not successful in getting op-eds in, always go to letters to the editor. I've often been told, even as a professional writer, if a topic isn't something of interest to the editor to put on that page, they'll say, can you condense this and send it as a letter to the editor? So oftentimes that's a backup plan, even if you don't get the op-ed space. And letters to the editor are important. I've done workshops on this in the past, and I tell people always, even if they don't get published, just showing editors that people care about this issue and keeping it in their ear that when an animal story comes out, whether positive or negative, send those letters to the editor. Don't just leave it as a comment on Facebook. Take that instead and put it into an email and send it to the editor, because that will have impact to keep these stories going. It keeps people like me in business and the animals having a voice in the media through me, because they know that readers care about these topics through letters to the editor.
Great topic. Deepali asks, I want to write an opinion piece about the need for pharmaceuticals that don't utilize animal ingredients. This isn't very well known or understood. Thoughts on how to approach it?
Great topic. I know a lot of publications are very interested in the pharmaceutical, animal-based research, that kind of thing, because there's a lot of sort of credibility behind its science. It's not as, say, intangible as sort of animal rights. Again, I'd say just wait for the moment that something regarding pharmaceuticals comes up in the news. That is something that happens a lot. So you can also alter your opinion piece to work with a current news story, right? I will often say that, it's kind of a Trojan horse. I will use a current news story as my hook in, and then use it as just a vehicle to couch in a different message or a broader message or an adjacent message. So use whatever news cycle thing you can as your way in, but have your basic opinion that's lower down and make it work. Just make it related, but use that as just a vehicle to talk about, animal rights, or in this case, alternatives to animal testing, things like this. So yeah, you can sort of strategically do that.
I'd also add to add to what Jessica was saying earlier about the Google News alerts. You could set up Google Scholar alerts as well to see if new research studies are published related, because this is an academic subject, right? Pharmaceuticals and ingredients. If there's a new study that comes out about this, even if it doesn't get media attention, you can pitch saying new study finds blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
And that's a good hook. Yeah.
And it adds credibility. Anytime that there's a new study that comes out that is, in, say, a very well-known journal or something, that is definitely a great way in to a publication, even if it hasn't gotten news. Great point.
I love Google Scholar alerts. I'm a big nerd, but I think they go a long way. Okay. Great questions, everybody. Let's keep it going. Jenny is a fan of all of your articles. Dennis asks, thank you very much, Jessica. Some of us will be writing for the first time. Any suggestions for the pitch? Should you write it first and say, I can send it to you by 5 p.m.? Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, it's all about your own process and what the editor prefers. I often say I can get it to you as soon as tomorrow, or I could spend more time, get it to you by the end of the week, whatever you prefer, things like that. So you give the editor the option, and then they'll know what to expect, that, you know, it's more of a hot take if I do it by tomorrow, or if you want me to spend more time, gather more sources, I can get it to you by the end of the week, and then they get to choose. Sometimes it'll be open-ended, and then you get to decide. But yeah, I think just having great communication with an editor, all you want to do is get that first response back. So keep things succinct, to the point, as I say in the video, state who you are, what sort of work you've done in the past, if at all, and then why you are the unique person who can tell this story. That's really the most important thing, is to explain why you are the most important person, the only person who can tell this story over anyone else because of your lived experience or your expertise.
Great answer. Anita writes, where do we draw the line between pitching adequately versus over pitching? Specifically, if somebody is, if the author is in the early stages of their career.
Yeah, that is a fine line for sure. There is sort of this rule that when you're pitching to a publication, you don't pitch elsewhere at the same time. You should only pitch one place at a time. There is a bit of a dance after that, though, to figure out how long you wait, because especially for doing the news cycle, we don't want to wait too long. As soon as you can pitch, the better, so that it gives you more leeway to try different places if you need to. I typically will wait no more than 48 hours if I don't hear back. Follow-ups are great. Sometimes I'll send a follow-up. If it's a super timely thing, I'll send a follow-up as early as 24 hours late, but usually it's about 48 hours. I'll send a follow-up, hey, just bumping this up in your inbox. Did you get a chance to review it yet? I'd love to get this to you as soon as I can. Really talking about the urgency and the timeliness of the topic. Otherwise, after 48 hours, if you do a follow-up and you don't hear back, boom, go to your next one. Have it ready and ready, waiting to go. So I give everybody, 24 to 48 hours. After the follow-up, I would wait till the end of that day, and then I would go again to another one. And if you do more than one at one time, you risk being accepted at both and then having to say no to one, and that's really, you don't want to do that. So best to space it out 24 to 48 hours, and then you're not over pitching. And you can keep going back to the same publication over and over. If they don't take one, you keep trying the next. They just have to wait until an editor, you spark their interest. You're not going to annoy anyone. That's their job.
I see a hand, so Kathleen, feel free to unmute and ask a question.
Oh, yes. Good afternoon. Thanks for the excellent presentation. I've written several LTEs, and I'm still learning a lot from this. You're good at what you do. Now, you're just discussing what to do when you submit an LTE, and how much time do you wait to hear back before going to another publication? An op-ed. But now, when you write an LTE, they don't contact you and say, we're printing this or we're not. Now, when I present one to the Daily News, my supervisor at the Humane Lane League suggested that I wait a week or so and then submit it to someone else if I wanted to. What about a situation where they publish it or they don't, but they don't contact you and tell you that they will or won't be? How do you handle that, please?
I've actually never experienced that before. I've never had something published without communication before. I would find that very odd, because usually there has to be some kind of usually an editing process, usually some kind of fee thing. But yeah, when we're talking about letters to the editor, it's going to be different. So they do that where they just take it or leave it. Sometimes they contact you to confirm your identity, and that's how you'll know that you're probably getting published. I'd say with letters to the editor, because the rules are a little bit more flexible, I would send out letters to the editor to multiple places at the same time, written differently. So that way you know that if they are getting published in different places, they're not word for word the same thing. So that's a different rule, I think, for letters to the editor. I would just rewrite it in different forms formats, little different wording, and send it out to all the places that you can.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
You're very welcome.
Great question, Kathleen. We have another question from Dennis, who asks, if you're a first-time writer, do you think it's better to have a team of 2 or 3 writers? Would that be more successful when pitching as opposed to just one?
Co-authoring can be a very effective strategy. I would say not more than 2 people in one piece. But that's a very good question, because this is also a very good in. If you are someone who hasn't written before, I love co-authoring with academics. That will often get me into, say, a publication like the Globe and Mail, more than others, more than other chances. So so for example, I love to co-author with, say, nutrition experts, or Dr. Charu, who runs the Canadian Centre for Alternatives to Animal Methods. So instead of writing about her, I'll write with her. It's a little bit harder of a process to do. It takes a little more time, of course, going back and forth, both ensuring that everybody contributes. But that's a really great strategy if you aren't really kind of known yet, is to say that you are working with this expert and you both can pitch together. You as an advocate, them as an academic, or you as an advocate, or you as a rescuer and them as an expert, and you write it together. That's a really, really good way to get a piece published.
Okay, great. We have a couple more questions that are specific to the Winnipeg Free Press. So is there a strategy to getting your op-ed published on the big readership day, for example, Saturday, for the Winnipeg Free Press? And apparently, it's for letters to the editor, submitting them on Thursday mornings by 10 a.m. tends to work. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? And then also for the Winnipeg Free Press, excuse me, is there a team of editors or a single person who's approving the pitches, if you know?
Yes, so at the Winnipeg Free Press, shout out Winnipeggers. There is one editor. His name is Russell. He runs the opinion department. The opinion department is kind of an island, and being able to get it published on a specific day is really not under your control. I guess there could be strategies with when you pitch that some people might believe work, but in general, it's going to be up to the editor. Having a more timely issue and writing it in a really persuasive way can be helpful. I know if you have a higher quality piece in the mind of the editor, they're more likely to put it in the Saturday paper, but really that's all up to them. So it's kind of luck of the draw and based on the topic and how well you write about it. As far as when to write letters to the editor, that's great to know. I didn't know that. That's a good tip. A lot of these things are sort of secret, right? Where we don't always know what's going on behind closed doors. And we're kind of at the mercy of editors in that way. I still am too. So if anyone has tips, always let me know too.
Okay, I think there's one question, unless I missed any more. One last question, which is from Noah. Any tips for pitching to wider publications?
Yes, so of course the higher end places, your very big marketplaces. I'm still working on that. I have been pitching the New York Times for 10 years and I have yet to land one yet. So it's a work in progress. I think the things that we've talked about here, making sure that it is timely, making sure it's connected to a news story in that publication or something that's been being broadly talked about, the more broad it is, more maybe culturally intertwined rather than say just a quick hit news piece, the more likely you're going to get it published. And as I said, being the one person who can talk about this over anyone else, presenting yourself as the insider, as the expert, as the person with the perspective that the public needs to know and doesn't know, but all those things are going to get you more likely to get into a publication. But of course, any sort of issue that is more of national or international consequence is more likely to get you into those bigger papers.
I would also add, if you have like a goal publication, I would just pay extra attention to the animal related articles that publication has published in the past, right? So be very actively engaged. Like, then I'll give an example. Like the New York Times rarely publishes like an entirely pro-animal piece, but they will, it's not frequently, but on an occasional basis, publish a pro-animal message within some sort of pro-human message, or something about workers at slaughterhouses, or the human rights of factory farms of like residents in rural areas, for example. That's a relatively common NYT angle. So if you pay attention to patterns like that, you can apply them in your pitches going forward.
That's a really good. And also environmental issues too. We see a lot more coverage of environmental and climate issues, and we can tie that to topics of animal agriculture. So again, if you see a publication talking a lot about climate change, you can bring in animal agriculture and animal farming into those types of topics. That's a great point, Björn.
Yeah, a lot of this boils down to just being very hyper aware of like the narrative landscape, just in general, and in the publications that you want to work with. It just, keeping your finger on the pulse. That's what a lot of it boils down to. Okay, we are 1 minute over. Any last questions? I think we answered everything. If not, this is your last moment. Okay, it seems like no.
You can all reach me online too if anyone has anything they want to chat about afterwards. I'm always happy to help anyone else who wants to do this kind of work. You can reach me at jessica@sentientmedia.org.
Okay, jessica@sentientmedia.org. Thank you everybody for coming. I did see a couple questions about the recording. I am going to put a link to the recording probably later this week in the Media Strategies channel within Hive, so keep an eye out for that. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Bjorn, for hosting.
Thank you. This is helpful.
Super. So bye-bye for now.
Thank you so much.